At the very moment the new year begins, a tiny kick under Linda's pregnant belly changes everything in their quiet home. Hello everyone, wishing you a peaceful and beautiful day. Today we're stepping into a tender New Year's Eve with Linda and Kwang as they cook bonchung, wait beside the fire, and welcome midnight as a family of three in the most intimate way. If you enjoy heartfelt, slice-of-life love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter. Linda woke early, before the house found its usual noise. She turned carefully onto her side, one hand cupping her large, pregnant belly, the other reaching for Kwang. His spot was empty. From the kitchen came the soft rush of water and the faint clink of a bowl. She pushed herself up, slow and practiced, and walked down the hallway in her slippers. She wore Kwang's oversized sweater, the hem stretched over her stomach. Kwang stood at the sink with his sleeves rolled up, rinsing broad green leaves. When he saw her, his face softened. "Hey," he said, "you're up." "I smelled the leaves," Linda murmured, leaning in the doorway. Kwang's eyes flicked to her belly. "Come sit, not stand." He pulled out the chair with the thick cushion he'd insisted on buying and nudged it closer. Linda sat, exhaling. Kwang set a kettle on the stove, then brought a bowl of warm water to the table. "Slow today," he said. "No rushing." Linda dipped her fingers in and started rinsing the leaves, smoothing each one flat on a clean cloth. The motion steadied her. Kwang stayed nearby. When she leaned forward too much, his hand found the middle of her back, light and steady. On the counter, everything was arranged neatly. Soaked glutinous rice, peeled mung beans, pork belly, coils of bamboo string. "You did all this already," Linda said. Kwang shrugged. "I woke up early." "Because you were excited," she teased. He nodded toward her belly. "Because someone was practicing dance moves at 3 a.m. Linda gasped, offended, then laughed. "Or her," Kwang echoed, smiling. He poured ginger tea into 2 mugs and slid one toward her. Not too strong. Linda warmed her hands around the mug. "Okay," she said. "What's next, Chef Kwang?" "Filling," he said. "But you sit. You season. I do the heavy parts." Linda opened her mouth to argue, then saw the calm firmness in his face. She nodded. Kwang drained the rice and spread it out. He mashed the mung beans into a soft paste. Press, scrape, press. When he brought the pork belly to the table, Linda straightened. "Let me season," she said. Kwang slid the plate toward her. "Okay, sit back." She scooted back anyway. She seasoned the meat the way her aunt taught her. Salt, pepper, a small splash of fish sauce, a pinch of sugar. Kwang watched her more than the food. "You look happy," he said softly. Linda paused. "I am. It feels normal." "Normal is good," Kwang said. She wiped her hands and leaned back and felt a sharper flutter under her palm. A tap, then another. Linda's eyes widened. "Wait!" Kwang stepped closer. "What?" She pressed her hand to the spot. "Put your hand." Kwang hesitated for half a second, then laid his palm gently on her belly. They held still. A firm little bump pressed into his hand. Kwang inhaled, stunned. His eyes went glossy, like something inside him had moved too. Linda let out a small laugh through the tightness in her throat. He said hi. "Or she," Kwang whispered. "Or she," Linda agreed. Kwang crouched, bringing his face closer. Linda threaded her fingers into his hair for a moment, holding him there. Then Kwang stood and cleared his throat, reaching for the next task like it could keep him steady. They moved to the living room table for more space. Kwang laid down a clean sheet, set the bowls within reach, and brought a small stool for Linda's feet without comment. He knelt beside the table, arranging everything with serious focus. "You've done this before?" Linda asked. Kwang looked up, slightly sheepish. "I watched videos," Linda laughed. "Of course you did. And I asked Auntie Han," he added. Linda lifted her eyebrows. You talked to Han? Kwang's ears reddened. She said I need to learn properly if I'm taking care of a pregnant wife. Linda smiled, imagining it. And you listened? I listen, Kwang said, holding her gaze for a beat. Especially when it's about you. Linda looked away, shy, and picked up a leaf. She folded it into a square. Kwang copied her. His corners collapsed. No, like this, Linda said, leaning forward just a little. She showed him where to crease. Kwang tried again, concentrating hard. The second one held its shape. Good, Linda said. Really? He asked, hopeful. Really, Linda smiled. If you were our baby, I'd give you a sticker. I'm not a baby, Kwang muttered. Linda touched her belly. One is coming. Kwang sighed. Okay, I practice. They started filling. Rice, mung bean, pork, mung bean, rice. Linda measured by instinct. Kwang measured like he was afraid of doing it wrong. Too much rice, Linda whispered, nudging his spoon back. How do you know? Because I'm Vietnamese, she said, very serious. Kwang stared, then laughed, the sound low and relieved. They wrapped the first cake. Kwang's string slipped, his knot loosened. Linda guided him gently, voice patient, hands steady. Each cake got a little neater. By the fourth cake, Linda's lower back started to ache. Kwang noticed before she said anything. Break, he said, standing immediately. I can do one more, Linda protested. No, Kwang said softly. Final. He brought a small pillow for her lower back and shifted the bowls closer so she didn't have to lean. Linda watched him, throat tight. You're going to spoil me. Kwang bent and kissed her temple. Good. When the last cake was tied, Kwang carried them to the kitchen in careful trips. Outside, he had already set the large pot on a low stove and stacked dry wood nearby. He checked the water level, then lowered the cakes into the pot, layering them with care. Linda stood at the doorway with one hand on the frame. She didn't step into the yard. She just watched. Kwang turned. Stay there, he said automatically, soft but certain. I'm just watching, Linda replied. Good, Kwang said, striking a match. The flame caught, then steadied. He washed his hands and came back. A chair waited just inside the doorway, close enough to feel warmth, far enough from smoke. He guided Linda down, then sat on a low stool beside her. They listened to the fire and the first quiet bubbling in the pot. From somewhere down the alley came voices calling greetings, the busy sound of people preparing for night. Linda's hand rested on her belly. Kwang's hand found hers there, natural and steady. Linda looked at him for a long moment. What? Kwang asked. Nothing, Linda said, smiling small but full. Just, thank you. Kwang squeezed her hand once. We're home, he said, like it was the simplest truth. Linda nodded, letting that truth settle as the pot began its long, patient boil. Kwang kept the fire low and even, feeding it a split piece of wood at a time. The pot's lid trembled with a steady rhythm. Linda watched from the doorway chair, her feet on the small stool, hands wrapped around warm ginger tea. Every few minutes, Kwang glanced over, checking her posture the way he checked the water level. When she shifted, he appeared beside her, tucking the pillow behind her lower back and smoothing the blanket over her knees. I'm fine, Linda said, half amused. I know, Kwang replied. Fine can be softer. The hours passed the way a good day does, quietly, without announcements. Kwang rinsed bowls, wiped the counter, stacked firewood near the stove. Linda folded extra leaves and arranged the bamboo strings into neat bundles. They spoke in small sentences, the kind that didn't need endings. Are we supposed to keep it boiling like this? Kwang asked, eyes on the pot. Yes, Linda answered, like patience. Kwang gave a small smile, as if he was taking notes. In the afternoon, he brought her a small plate of fruit and sat on the low stool beside her. The smell of smoke clung to his shirt, familiar and comforting. You're watching me, Linda said. I'm watching both of you, Kwang corrected, nodding at her belly. Linda rolled her eyes, but her hand went to the curve of her stomach anyway. Under her palm, the baby shifted, slow, deliberate. Linda froze. "Wait," she whispered. Kwang leaned in, careful, and laid his hand where hers was. They held still. Another soft movement pressed into his palm like a quiet answer. Kwang's face changed, the way it always did when he felt her move. Surprise first, then something tender that made his eyes shine. "Hi," he said, barely louder than the bubbling pot. Linda's throat tightened. "You're going to say hi 100 times." "Yes," Kwang said, completely serious. "Until she's born." Linda touched his cheek with her fingertips. "You'll be a good dad." Kwang looked at her for a long moment. "I'm trying," he said softly. As the sky cooled toward dusk, distant pops echoed from somewhere far, early fireworks testing the night. Linda startled at the sound. Kwang immediately searched her face. "Too loud?" "No," she said, then smiled as the feeling settled. It's really happening." Kwang nodded. "Our first New Year like this." Linda glanced down at her belly. "Like this," she echoed. Kwang checked the water once more, poured in a steady stream, and fed the fire with practiced hands. Then he came inside and washed up, thorough and calm like midnight deserved clean hands. He laid out a soft sweater for Linda, loose enough to fall easily over her pregnant belly, and brought warm water so she could refresh without standing long. He moved around her with the quiet confidence of someone who had already decided what mattered. When Linda came back to the living room, her hair damp and her cheeks warm, Kwang was waiting with 2 clean cups of tea and a small tray of sweets. The altar table in the corner had been cleaned earlier, brass shining softly, fruit arranged neatly, flowers set in a simple vase. Linda slowed near it, one hand supporting her belly. Kwang hovered close, not crowding, just ready. "I'm okay," Linda whispered. "I know," Kwang whispered back. "I'm just here." Linda lit the candles. The flames stood small and steady. She held the incense between her palms, closed her eyes, and bowed. Her prayer was quiet and plain. Health, peace, a safe birth, a home that stayed gentle. When she finished, she turned and offered the incense to Kwang. "Your turn." Kwang took it carefully, as if he could feel the weight of the moment. He bowed and murmured a few words Linda couldn't catch. When he straightened, his eyes were damp, but his face stayed calm. Linda didn't ask what he said. She reached for his hand instead, and he held on like he needed the contact. They sat on the sofa with the tray between them. Kwang shifted the pillows behind Linda and tucked the blanket over her legs. He did it slowly, with the same focus he'd used to tie the cakes. "Kwang," Linda said. I used to think New Year was about crowds," she admitted. "Noise, proving something." Kwang listened, his hand resting on her belly. "And now," Linda continued, "it's just this, you, this house, her. And it feels bigger than anything I tried to chase before." Kwang's thumb traced slow circles through the sweater. "That's enough for me," he said. The clock ticked toward midnight. Outside, the fireworks grew louder, scattered bursts becoming waves. Kwang didn't turn on the television. He didn't reach for his phone. He stayed where he was, present. A few minutes before 12, he stood and went to the doorway to check the pot one last time. Steam rose into the cold air. The boil held steady, patient and sure. Kwang nodded to himself, then returned inside, shutting the door gently behind him to keep the warmth. Linda watched him cross the room. "Are you nervous?" she asked. Kwang sat back down and took her hand in both of his. "Not nervous," he said after a beat. "Careful," Linda smiled. "You've been careful all year." Kwang looked at her belly, then at her face. "I want to be careful forever." The last minute arrived. Linda sat up a little straighter, breathing slow. Kwang brought her hand to his lips for a brief kiss, then placed it back on her stomach. His other hand covered hers, warm and steady. "Ready?" he asked. Linda nodded. "Ready." The final seconds passed in their breathing. Then midnight hit, and the sky outside cracked open with fireworks, bright, loud, full of life. Kwang leaned in and kissed Linda's forehead, lingering. "Happy New Year," he murmured. "Happy New Year," Linda whispered back. Right then, a clear, unmistakable kick met Kwang's palm, sharp and perfect, as if timed on purpose. Kwang let out a soft, stunned laugh. "She heard us." Linda's eyes filled, but her smile stayed steady. "She's with us," she said. Kwang pressed his cheek gently to her belly for a heartbeat, then sat back and looked at Linda, his gaze open and calm. He didn't make grand promises. He just said, "We're here. We're okay." Linda leaned into him, letting her head rest on his shoulder. Outside, the fireworks kept blooming, but inside the house, the only steady sound was their breathing. And faintly beyond the door, the patient boil of Bon Chung holding inside its warmth everything through the feels night. Held. Two people and a third they can't see yet, already making the room feel fuller.
Linda theo bà và cậu cháu ra nương mía. Dưới nắng sớm, bà vừa chặt mía vừa kể chuyện ngày xưa. Dậy chặt 3 hoặc 4 khúc cho đẹp để bán được giá. Đồng mía cao dần, 45 đồng trở thành hy vọng cho phiên chợ. Một cây mía đổ bất ngờ khiến cả nhóm kêu, rồi cười xòa vì kịp đỡ nhau. Chiều xuống, Linda buồn bã vì con rúi của mình đã biến mất. Nghi có kẻ trộm rình quanh nhà. CEO Quang ghé đến lắng nghe và trấn an và tự sửa chiếc camera cũ trong kho, kéo dây lắp trước sân nhà để bảo vệ cô. Đêm đến, Linda nấu cơm nếp cẩm mời anh ở lại ăn. Hai người trò chuyện lòng ấm lại. Quang kể áp lực công ty, camera nháy sáng, bóng lạ thoáng qua, và không biết Linda có sống sót qua được đêm nay không. Mọi người nếu thấy video hay, hãy cho mình một like, một subscribe. Cảm ơn mọi người nhé.